What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Cars with Cocktails. Since Paul botched up the intro last time, I have been tasked with doing said intro. This is the podcast where we combine two wonderful things, drinking and driving. And if you haven't noticed, we're actually in person. If you're listening, you couldn't know that, other than maybe the audio sounds a little better. But if you're watching, of course, Paul is here at the shop, and we got working on this fine automobile behind us, which brings me to what we're going to talk about today, the best and worst Volkswagens.
Best and worst VW model. So obviously there's going to be a lot of polarization in this particular subject. Why don't you make your drink today?
I'm going to make my drink while you...
Oh, I should also discuss the type of drink we're having called the Dirty Virgin.
Oh my.
I don't even know how you could be a I guess there's a way to be a dirty virgin.
I think that there's something on this ice cube.
Oh, yeah,
we don't
want that.
Sorry
We don't want that one. Yeah, so it is half an ounce of. This says brown cream de cacao. We got the clear one. I think it's okay, and some gin. So we're rolling with that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this is going to be, but I'm typically a gin fan, so yeah, we'll do that out. So we are talking about, you say half an ounce and 1 ounce?
Half an ounce and an ounce and a half.
Oh my, that's a half. Talking about best and worst VW models. I know you guys all have your opinion on what the best and worst. I wonder, there's always an opinion when there's a best. But do you think that there's like a consensus almost to the point of fact when it comes to the worst? Or do you think that still polarizes people too?
I think it polarizes people only for the fact that most people base everything off of that is complete confirmation bias, which is they think that the thing that they have is the best thing and that other people's stuff sucks and the other way, like that's a problem that people often can't look past.
I'm wondering, though, is it more of like a race to the bottom? Like, nah, man, the model that I think sucks is shittier than your model.
For sure that. I definitely think that's the case. Did you do an ounce or ounce and a half?
I did an ounce and a half. But okay. I have to tell you, like...
It doesn't look like a lot.
There is not very much in there. Some may say it's
2 ounces.
2 ounces. Is this a shot that you're supposed to have? Or just
I guess. I guess we can...
It smells weird.
If you want, we can double it up and we'll get real day drunk. Apparently, it's a little.
Wow.
I'm gonna go.
So I recommend on that
a little
first
heavier.
Sip, just let it simmer. Less. Yeah, I think you need to let that chill.
I'm gonna go a little heavier on the cream de cacao.
I'm already smashed.
I think. What is that? That is...
Well. You may have
I actually put in way too much. This shot glass.
It's half one and 1.5.
Yeah, I see that. It was a fatal error on my part. I put in, so I'm gonna go a little bit heavier on this because I put in, I think, 2 full ounces of.
Hold on, before you do that little pour again. You guys need to see Paul's pour. It was very dainty,
you like that? Like this?
Yeah, there it is.
Very ladylike. You like that style?
That was fresh.
It's all on the wrist. If we get that.
Welcome to the How to Delicately Make Drinks by Paul.
I am not a skilled beverage maker.
Yeah. As we've learned, neither am I. But all right, so you want to start with best model or worst model?
Okay, I think most people are going to want to hear the best model, so let's do that last.
You'll have to wait till the end. Okay, so best VW models, one of the cool things about Volkswagen, and one of the things that really, it didn't initially draw me into this world, but it kind of kept me there, is that everybody pretty much has a VW story. Or like a one-off VW story. My aunt had a bug going to school, or my first car was a GTI or something like that. I say all that to say we're probably going to miss one of someone's favorite. Mm-hmm. Don't get sad. Just drop it in the comments and let us know, hey, fools, you missed my favorite. So I'm thinking about myself personally and what some of my favorite, but we're not talking about favorite, we're talking about best, but they kind of go hand in hand for me anyway.
I think they're almost the same. I think the objectivity in the idea of best is kind of, it exists. There is objectivity, but the reality is that best is so subjective, and depending on, like, okay, what metric are we using for best? Is best best handling, best looking, best overall performance. How do you compare a car that's fucking 18 years old to a new car? Like, all that stuff is silly, right?
Best car as a technician at a dealership to make a living.
Right.
Don't think that there is one car
be a
that I know.
B5 Passat.
Yeah, it's a B5 Passat. There's no better. All right, so I'll start with mine. I have a couple that I'm pretty sentimental with, and probably my favorite VW of all time is going to be the Mark IV R32. I realize how biased I am on that, but I own two for a reason. When it came out, it was an amazing driving car. The fit and finish was better than anything else in the class. I mean, the Evo's cool, the STI is cool. They're both faster than the Volkswagen R32. They probably handle in right situations better, but drive an STI and then get in an R32, it's the difference between driving a Kia and a Mercedes.
Yeah, the thing that I certainly think, especially historically, this isn't really true anymore, but it used to be true, is I actually don't think it's that bad. I'm a little heavier on the cream to cacao. Maybe you might want to get a little bump in that. It does get a little burn going down, though. The earlier model, or really most until very recently VW models, the advantage was not overall performance. It was not, hey, this car performs better. The selling point was, hey, you compare a Mark IV R32. It was actually, I think they were more expensive than STI when they, or roughly.
Yeah, probably.
I think they were more.
Well, and in an STI, you could get it like with no radio.
Correct.
And crazy
right.
stuff.
You can get
like
the strip out
that.
version,
Yeah.
So you'd pay more money for a car that was significantly less fast and handled worse. But the overall experience of owning the car, because we're not race car drivers, and regardless of all the fucking people who think that they are a race car driver, you don't actually drive like a real race car on the street, right?
You are not Tanner Fouts.
Yes. What you're getting is the experience, right? So that was always the advantage of one versus the other, which, kind of ended a little bit in terms of, I don't think most of the enthusiast models are, but when we look at like the B7 Passat is probably the first one that you and I would say is here's a watered down car that was intended for the US market. They made it cheaper than the other cars. It had that harder dash, the plasticky feeling. It was a slight downgrade from what every experience was in previous models, and didn't feel quite as nice as the previous generations.
I would say you even saw that in the... Boy, we quickly turned from the best to the worst. I would say you even saw that transition in the B6 Passat, because you went from the B5 Passat, which favorite car hands down as a technician, because it is probably one of the most expensive VWs on the planet to own, with what breaks and how often, and just the level of maintenance on the car is insane, which is great for a technician when you get paid to fix broken cars. That said, I did own one, and it's probably one of the best handling Volkswagens.
A 4-lane suspension, right?
Outside of some of the enthusiast models like the R32 and the Golf R and things like that. But that car was an Audi. Right. It was an Audi A4. When we moved to the B6 generation, we started to get the Passat to just become a big Jetta.
Right.
And I don't think at that point it was really that bad. But when you went from 5, this amazing, amazing vehicle, to the 6, and you're like, all right, it's not bad. It doesn't handle as
I like
good.
B6 Passats.
I like B6 wagons.
Yeah,
but,
B6 wagon.
The rest, just compared, and being a B5.5 owner, comparing that the two, the 5.5 was a better driving experience. So instead of having a lower control arm, a tie rod connection in the steering and the wheel bearing housing in the upper strut tower, you had literally 4 control arms and a tie rod holding that front end, so you had no bump steer. The car, when aligned properly, would track perfectly, never pulled in a crown of the road. They were just amazing, amazing machines. So maybe I'll throw my B5.5 up at the top of that list.
At the top?
Not at
the very
top. Not at the very top, because I think as we sit today, right now, 2020, the year of our Lord, the Golf R, the 7.5 Golf R is such an amazing car. It's not perfect, but damn, technology-wise, handling-wise, performance. It's fast, even with the manual transmissions, which are slow and lame. I'm just kidding. I love manual transmissions, but it is slower than
DSGs are faster.
Hashtag DSG farts, right? The 7.5 is just such a great car, and top to bottom, I love it. Even I know there's a lot of people that are upset that it didn't come in a 2-door in the 7.5. I think the early 7 GTIs had two-door option. But
17 they canceled them, I think.
Yeah, I love that car. And, looking back further than that, fan of the Mark III GT. There's a lot of VWs where I'm like, it's a cool car, but it doesn't
what's funny? I always have people say, people who say that the Mark III is the worst GTI, and I don't generally agree with that. I mean, I really think the Mark IV GTI was probably the worst GTI.
I would say the Mark V GTI is probably the worst GTI.
I think aesthetically the Mark V GTI was the worst GTI.
And it's heavy and it's a fat pig of a car.
But the Mark IV was too.
Yeah.
Like the Mark
compared
IV,
to the 3,
yeah,
sure.
compared to a 3, and the Mark IV wasn't light, and also it still had a rear beam suspension.
Yep.
And it wasn't, for its time, it was great. And again, that's the only reason why I'm in this business in the first place, is because my first car, or my first new car, was a Mark IV GTI. And it got me into it, and it's the first car I modded, whatever. But objectively, it handled, I had a friend at the time who had a Mark II 16 valve, and we would go bomb back roads, and he would fucking destroy me because I couldn't even come close to keeping up. Because when it comes to handling a Mark II on coilovers versus a Mark IV, with the suspension mod, it's not even close in terms of the way they handle. And yeah, the 180 was faster than a 16 valve, but so it wasn't that fast.
Yeah, not fast enough to make up for its terrible.
Correct. It's
relatively terrible handling.
Yes.
Yeah. And I've actually, a Mark II is the one model VW that I've never owned and I don't have a lot of experience with. I'll say I do love the Mark I GTI. It was light, it was slow, but it was nimble and quick. It wasn't packed with features and technology or anything like that. It was pretty bare bones. So yeah, I get why people are so nostalgic for that. And I don't know, I'm not a big air-cooled guy, so I don't dare tread in a space where I don't know a whole lot of. I know there are a ton of air-cooled folks out there. For me, the coolness of air-cooled is in the Type 3. Squareback specifically, because I'm a wagon guy. Obviously, there's so many models. The bus, the Vanagon. Vanagons aren't air-cooled, but all the generations of Beetles, right? They all have their appeal, but
I think the Beetle, to me, I think being in dealerships, you spend a lot of time in dealers too, and I'm sure you had this experience, is we would always have customers come who were older, let's say, middle-aged to older.
I don't know how I'm gonna navigate my way through that.
I'm now approaching middle-aged myself, but they would always have stories, and it's obviously we were always busy, so I was like, okay, another story about
Francis.
Yeah, exactly.
Need to get back to work.
Yeah, it's put your ponytail up. I got to get back to work. But people are always really enthusiastic, and they would tell you their stories about the first car they had or the first car their parents had, and that was their experience. And most of them were Beetles, sometimes buses.
Yep.
And I think we both fall in the same realm of we're not air-cooled guys. I definitely get why people like them. Yeah. The ease of fixing them, even though they suck.
You needed just the tools that came in the toolkit.
Yeah,
I could have the engine out in 27 minutes.
A pair of channel locks and a flathead screwdriver will do just about anything you need.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think air-cooled is really in our realm. To me, certainly an icon that I've owned before that I didn't really keep for a super long time was the Corrado, which always had a near and dear place in my heart. Mine was a 16-valve turbo Corrado.
Yeah.
And then eventually ended up with a rod knock problem. Funny story, I actually sold it to a guy who is a local friend, guy who we do a lot of stuff with now. But I didn't know it had a rod knock. It actually,
really?
it didn't have a rod knock, actually. And then he was gonna buy it from me because he's a collector. He has a golf rally, and he's a British dude that imported some stuff and whatever. He's got a bunch of cool shit. And he came to pick it up, and he started up. He's like, hey, he came back inside. He's like, hey, this thing has a rod knock. And I was like, what? And I walk back there, and I'm like, that's a fucking rod knock.
Knock, knock, knock.
Yep. And so he ended up not buying because he was like, didn't want to deal with all that bullshit.
Sure. That makes sense.
And some other dude from Georgia who had like 9 other Corrados.
He needs 9 Corrados
Yeah.
to keep 2 on the road. The number of Corrados that I have tried to buy over the years, legit, this is not an exaggeration, it's probably been 9 or 10
Really?
different Corrados that I've tried to buy. And every damn time, just the owner doesn't want to come off the retarded price that they're asking for it, or this most recent one was a month ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was a perfect situation. The guy had the car, he had torn it down to fix something, got sidetracked on another project, so he never got it put back together, but he had all the parts that it needed to go back together, upgraded stuff for like the windows that are problematic, and upgraded this and Euro that, like the perfect situation. And I was like, cool. And he like wanted like $2,000 for it, which I thought was too much for the project
Because it was ripped apart.
But like, I can probably handle putting it back together. Right. He's like, all right, man. So like, I got this other guy though that came and looked at it, and he wants to trade me this air-cooled Beetle engine. And I really am thinking about that engine. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, like, he was here first. Yeah. If he doesn't buy it, let me know. And sure enough, he never called me back. So
he must have
sold it.
Done it. Yes.
To be fair, though, I have a torn apart Volkswagen there. Well, now I got a torn apart Volkswagen here. I got torn apart
6
up
other
front. So I guess I don't need another torn apart VW. But you'd mentioned the story, and everybody has a VW story, and I love that about the brand. I love that almost anyone you meet has that. Their first car was a GTI, or their mom drove them to school in a Bug, or something like that. And it's one of the coolest things, I think, about a foreign car brand. I mean, you don't get that from Toyota,
the
right?
Nostalgia,
Nobody's excited about the 87 Camry that their mom took them to school.
I say, like if you had a 87 Corolla,
different,
if you had an
completely
86,
different.
That's a little bit different.
Completely different, but the number of cool Corollas and cool Supras.
And you watch too much Initial D.
Yeah.
Then you think that your Corolla is a drift machine, and you're ready to go crush it on the mountain.
My 99 Corolla is a drift machine. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, certainly that is. I mean, it's funny, and it's such a different demographic, and you wonder, as somebody who is even in the industry, that's a big chunk there.
That is a big chunk. I'm going for it all though.
You always wonder, like, why is this the brand that has all that nostalgia? Because I've never really been able to identify. I mean, there's more uniqueness to the cars, and there's something different about all of them, especially historically.
Sure. I think they were cheap, relatively easy to work on. Good fuel economy for the time. When you go back to 60s, 70s.
Well, yes, the Beetle for sure. Yeah. But what about? I mean, the Rabbit obviously had its own.
But the bus, like, you need more room than a Beetle can fit, so you buy a bus instead of a Beetle. There is a period in time though where I struggle with, like, how the hell did y'all like these things? Because these were junk.
Yeah.
The early Mark IV days were.
It was a rough time. Whew. I mean, we both started at a similar time. What was your first year at a dealership?
04.
04. Okay. So I started, I think it was either 01 or 02. I can't remember. Yeah. I think it was 02.
Yeah, things were even worse back then.
Right. It was real bad back then, because back then, and I don't even know if you even ever had this experience. So back in the day, coil pack failure was a serious problem. And so were window regulators in Mark IVs.
Keep talking. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So both of these things, window regulators and the Mark IVs were a problem. What would happen is your window would just fucking drop. You would be driving, boom, window would drop. Well, the issue is that the clips were made of plastic. So these plastic clips would break, and the problem that they ran into with both the window regulators and with the coil packs is that they had an issue with part supply. So
I'm pulling an audible, by the way, and
That is a complete audible. That's fucking lime juice.
Yeah, but I'm still gonna drink the gin.
I mean, I get it. I guess I'm just gonna be fucking hammered by the time I leave here. Good thing I have a driver. So when that happened, it was wild because we had customers, and I don't think you ever dealt with this, but that's a serious pour you got there.
It's about a 50-50 shot, I think. I don't know.
So the cars would come in, ignition coil goes bad, misfire, blah, 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 all the bullshit, right? Part supply was so bad that at one point they would only allow you to replace a single ignition coil.
Yep.
And you had to order it by the VIN. You had no supply. You couldn't, because they couldn't supply enough parts. So we would have customers come in that you would have one ignition coil. The car would sit for 3-4 weeks. And then you would replace a single failed ignition coil, and they were going bad at such an insane rate. I was physically present at a dealership when we had a customer who waited for 4 weeks for their ignition coil, came to pick up their car, pulling out of our parking lot, they had another one fail.
That does not surprise me at all.
And the person, and keep in mind, I'm from northeastern New Jersey. They came in and fucking lost their shit. I mean,
you can't blame anybody.
I get why you'd be upset, but people from the Northeast tend to be a little bit on the harsher side of humans.
Nobody blessed your heart, is what you're saying.
Nobody blessed anybody's heart. And regulators, same thing. I mean, we had customers, regulators. We were only able to replace the single side, and we knew, you knew 100% the other side was going to fail. If 04, we hadn't resolved the problems by 04.
No. I mean, I remember cars lined up around the parking lot with ignition coil failures.
But by that point,
we had parts straight, though.
The parts were straight, right? So you had coils, and you did all 4 every time.
I started before that was a thing.
Okay. But you had metal clip regulators.
I had started right before the metal regulator clips came out, where they had that repair kit. I think that was like 05, because I still remember doing like one window, and you can only fix one. You couldn't do preventative warranty repairs and things like that. But yeah, I'd heard stories of cars sitting for months for one coil pack.
It was a shit show. I mean, it was, and God for us, being in the Northeast, it would snow.
Oh yeah.
And you have a car that's running on 3 cylinders. They barely move. So we'd have to plow the parking lot, and you could start a car, but you'd have to push it basically while you're trying to do it, just to get them moved out of the way.
Oh my God.
And then plow, and then push them, get them to push all back, because you can't drive through the snow on a car with 3 cylinders. You can drive on regular pavement and probably
you can at least nurse it into the shop, but not uphill in the snow both
Correct.
ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of deal. That, I am thankful I missed a lot of that. However, I didn't dodge any bullets because I started right when the 04 Touareg and Phaeton came out.
Oh, man, that was an interesting time.
And I don't know. I haven't ran the numbers from then versus now, adjusted for inflation, whether the newest generation of like Atlas Tiguan was a worse launch.
Oh, no. Touareg was way worse. Touareg.
But the stuff breaking on those cars is like evaporator cores and flooding water leaks.
Yeah, the water leaks is a problem, but
man, that 04. If you were around back at the dealer in 04, 05.
Remember how many lines of recalls would come in with a Touareg?
It'd be through like K, L, Z.
Yes.
Between complaints and recalls. I mean, it wouldn't be so. Every ticket that you get has line items for each customer concern, or at least it should. So if a customer has 3 concerns, there's 3 lines on the ticket. A lot of dealers use A, B, and C. Then you would do the recalls and campaigns, and no joke, you'd get a Touareg with 15 to 20 concerns, and that wasn't like I had at one time. That was normal. There was a couple of problems. One, people didn't know how to use the technology in the car. They were
certainly part of it. TPMS was a problem.
It was the TPMS was a ridiculously terrible system that people didn't also know how to use. Salesmen didn't go over how it went because they didn't know how it worked.
If you're not familiar with TPMS, Touareg was probably the first.
It was the first
model?
Volkswagen.
Yeah, first Volkswagen model with tire pressure sensors. Now every car has usually ABS-based tire pressure sensors, or tire pressure monitoring. But when it gets cold, temperature and pressure correlate together. So as temperature goes down, pressure also drops. So what would happen is cars would get cold, the pressure would drop, it would set tire pressure lights when it got, as soon as it got cold, because the system was not appropriately programmed, so it would cause fucking lights for completely unnecessary reasons. Therefore, you would have people who would have tire pressure lights. Now, fortunately, by the time that was happening, I was in the South. I can't imagine how bad it was in the North.
Well, even here, it was still happening because you'd get those like warm 80-degree afternoons.
Maybe it's worse here. I don't know.
And then you'd get it in like the upper 50s at night. And what happens? Mama goes out and starts her Touareg first thing in the morning, and it's bing, 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 bing. My car's fucking broke. Right. I am not hating on the customers for their...
No, I understand.
I remember...
They're not supposed to know better.
I remember 6 or 7 buybacks on the Touaregs over the years. But
because they couldn't stop it from happening.
Because they couldn't stop that, or this series of ridiculously weird things, and the number of campaigns for like pulling out a piece of rubber between the power steering cooler lines and software update. That was the first car where like software updates were legit.
Transfer cases.
Transfer cases. I mean, transfer cases. The motors for the
stepper motor.
The stepper motors. Thank you. I mean. The battery, we could spend like 7
alternator
hours.
Cable,
I loved those alternator cables. Fun fact, before that alternator cable campaign was a campaign, I think I got like the 3rd one in the U.S. that they identified as that being a problem. So he's like, order this part. I'm like, okay, cool. And I don't know, I'd been at the dealership maybe a year. And I had gotten to a point where I wasn't scared to work on the Touareg. So every single Touareg
they go to you.
Every one of them.
Usually that's what happened at every shop.
It sucked for a while until it didn't, and then it was really good, and then everyone else found out you could actually make money on them, and so I was stealing all the gravy. But I got this Touareg, and it's like the repair manual said to drop the engine out to replace this cable. I'm like, well, fuck that. I'm not doing that, even though they're built very easily to pull the engine off.
Yeah, it kind of sucks, though.
But, like, we only had two 220-volt outlets in the shop, so you had to work in one of 2 stalls, and of course those weren't my stalls.
For the viewers at home, Touaregs drop out the entire engine, transmission, front suspension altogether, so there's a special table.
Yeah, it's like a $10,000 table.
I think it's more than that. I think it's more like 20. But they have all these pins that you stick into the table and holes in the table, and it's like a lift that goes up into it. You don't fucking need that shit. We have a table at our shop that is a rolling table that can support 3,000 pounds, and we've used that for stuff. You just drop the car down onto the table and then unbolt everything. It's obviously not as good as the.
There's a really good like $5,000 I forget who the brand is, but it's very similar to that. Has all the holes, has pins and location and stuff. But anyway. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. So I spent about an hour just looking at the car, trying to figure it out. And I was able to do it in about half a day. And I got paid 17 hours for it. And I'm like, well, shit, send those motherfuckers.
Which eventually became a recall.
Yeah, and then they dropped it when it was a recall to like 3.5 hours.
Yeah, I say it was much less. Yeah.
It wasn't nearly as fun in 3 hours as it was for 16 hours. But the Touareg's kind of another one of those cars where...
Would you rank that as... so we've gotten very sidetracked here.
Yeah, this is what happens.
This is what we do.
Paul's already done with it. Do you need some more ice? I can get you some more
I will need some more alcohol.
Yeah.
Good thing I have a driver.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because this is about to get wild.
It's about to get crazy in here. Yeah, so we sidetrack, of course, but not really. I mean, we're talking about best and worst
Would
VW
you rank
models.
the Touareg as one of the worst?
I probably would, and
for what reason?
Unfairly, I think, at this point in time, because I saw the initial launch and dealt with so many broken Touaregs. When you say, is the Touareg a good vehicle, my initial thought is I go back to all those recalls that we had. Keep in mind, 15 years ago.
Yes, a long time ago.
That's where it goes to. I will say, though, if you go from about 2005 model year forward, the Touareg is a great vehicle. We have a 2015 Touareg. Of course, it's a diesel, so it's had a lot of like DPF light issues. Thankfully, it's under warranty, so I don't care about the timing of that. But really, when you get into the 06 Touareg and forward, whether it be the T1, the T2, the T3. Oh, I have more of this if you want.
Oh.
But, have that. That's good. That's from Derm. Derm.
Constipation. Conniption. How about that?
But anyway, when you look at the Touareg as a whole, it's not free of problems, but it is an insanely capable SUV.
See, I think you're skewed because
I'm totally skewed.
No, in terms of the early Touaregs, because our Touareg, our shop Touareg that I bought for $1,240, $50. I don't, whatever the fuck I paid for it. Look at the video. God damn it.
I'd like to say I'd put the thing in the card, but I won't.
No, we won't do it. We won't do it. That car, I mean, we fixed quite a few things.
Sure.
But aside from that, it's actually, I mean, V8 steel suspension Touareg.
I think when you get past the pickiness of a vehicle owner for a car under warranty, it's great. Because, I mean, the majority of the repairs I did were under warranty. Cracking wood grain trim, rattles, knick-knacky bullshit that...
Well, also, you keep in mind, most people don't realize this, Touaregs were expensive.
Yeah.
What's a low-end Touareg? Was like 55 grand?
I would say 55 is probably like the mid-range of...
Yeah, and so if you had a nice Touareg, like a V10, people don't realize this.
A V10
TDI was like 80 grand.
Yeah, that's 80 grand.
That's an $80,000 vehicle in 2004. That's a fucking expensive car. You know, by today's dollars, are you looking up what today's dollars that is? I'm betting it's going to be somewhere in the $110,000 range now. So if you're talking about a car that's that expensive, so somebody bought a V10 TDI Touareg and it's fucking insanely expensive, of course they're going to have high expectations for the car.
Wow, how much did you say?
I said 110.
So it is equal to the buying power in 2020 of $104,000.
Oh, yeah, pretty close.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty close. I'm pretty proud of myself. It's almost like I know about money. So, yeah, I mean, 105 grand for a car today is fucking insane. That's a lot of money. It's an expensive car by any standard.
Yeah, totally.
And never mind, you know, you're talking about, I feel like, I don't know about you feel like this, but I feel like luxury cars, people have now accepted luxury cars more, they're more embraced now than they were back then. It was not a thing that people just went out and bought all the time. Right. It was like, if you bought a luxury car back then, it was like, oh, we're really splurging for something that is a big expense. Maybe they can afford it, maybe they can't, whatever, but they're doing it. And it's not something that everybody does.
I don't know. I wonder though if that's more of a outsider perception because think of what was a luxury car in 2004, feature-wise, performance-wise, is not a luxury car today. I mean, heated seats were like, oh my God, the car's got heated seats, and now it's like the car doesn't have heated seats.
Right.
What is this?
Well, anything with leather, I'm basically
a bottom-level Kia. I mean, so I think what I'm trying to say is all those features that were exotic,
they've leveled up, yes, for sure,
are now standard.
But that's a technology, right? So that
it's everything. It's like, you know, pleather and it's fake leather instead of cloth or whatever. Power windows versus whatever. But either way, I mean, think about spending $110,000 on a car today, and that shit's breaking 3 times a month. And at 15,000 miles, you're doing $2,000 worth of brakes. And at 15,000 miles, you're putting $2,000 worth of tires on the damn thing, because that's how fast they would eat brakes and tires.
Yeah. That's
ridiculous.
How many miles did you say?
15,000.
Oh yeah.
And that was like, wow, you got a lot. You did good.
19,000 miles, something like that. Yeah, it was pretty fucking wild. Did you put lime juice in this? I don't know what happened. I feel like
you changed gins.
Oh, wow. That's pretty shocking. How?
Yeah.
Maybe I went a little too light on the.
You need more cacao.
I need some cacao. If it has a very citrusy kind of flavor to it.
Maybe you're smelling mine.
Could be.
And it's messing with your...
Yeah. But see, here's the thing, though. I mean, I get why you would say the Touareg is the worst. But I
am also very upfront with...
But...
Because of my experience.
Yeah, but I feel like once you get past... Like a V8 steel suspension Touareg. That's why... You know, it's funny. You... probably don't know this. There's a YouTube channel called The Fast Lane Car. They bought a Touareg and they did all kinds of off-road shit. You know just as well as I do because you were around for the early Touareg. Touaregs are insanely capable off-road.
It's a beast.
Insanely capable. It's one of the things that actually they talked about so much in a Touareg, but it's so dumb because nobody who really wanted to off-road it would spend that much money on an off-road vehicle.
No.
But now that they're more affordable, people are doing that. So the Fastlane car did a series around it. It got a lot of hype. Ironically, I'd already been looking for a Touareg as like a tow, whatever fuck around vehicle for us. They bought that car and did a video series like right as we were buying the car. So our stuff kind of fell in line with them, but it was like they were telling people to like, hey, this is a V8 air suspension, and I was like, no,
don't do it.
No, don't do it, because air suspension obviously is something.
There was a recall on the air ride too, rebuilding the AC or the air compressors.
Yeah, air ride is something that introduces an inevitably problematic system, especially when you're talking about something that's fucking 20 years old or nearly 20 years old at this point.
Yep.
That is completely unnecessary. I mean, to me, a V8, yes, V8s are, if you do the time belt and you do basic maintenance stuff, they'll probably last forever. The only problem that you have is what our Touareg had, which was a chain tensioner failed, and it ended up eating the head. But other than that, they're kind of reliable. Minus.
Yeah, I fully admit and am very upfront about the fact that I think it's such a shitty vehicle because it was a shitty vehicle
for the time,
for a long time.
For a new car, it was.
I stand behind that. That must be the worst launch for a new vehicle in Volkswagen history.
Yeah, it's funny. We've fucking spent so much time talking about the Touareg. I actually have thought before, and I've said this a lot of times, I doubt I said it publicly, but I think they should have changed the name of the Touareg. I think the Touareg 2. I think the Touareg 2, they made a terrible mistake by not changing the name because it had such a bad reputation from the Touareg 1 in terms of reliability problems and all the other stuff that it killed the ability for it to sell, which inevitably led to it not being in the U.S. anymore. After Touareg 3.
Yeah, which is too bad because the Touareg 3...
Because the Touareg 4 in Europe is fucking dope. I mean, when you see pictures of it in Europe, you're like, wow, that is a beautiful vehicle.
But even our T3,
T3 is great.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's great fuel economy, tons of power. It'll tow a damn house. Mama loves it.
And if it's a diesel, it's extremely clean.
Yeah, extremely. Cheap box. Did you see the wink? No, I enjoy beating up on the Touareg because it's done that to me for a lot of my career. Although I will say I am thankful, and I've said this many times, I'm thankful that I started my career at that time and went down the path of having to be the one in the shop that fixed all the Touaregs because it made me a far better technician than I would have been otherwise if I was just doing fucking window regulators and slapping coil packs and doing...
First time I had to use chassis ears in my career.
I got to plug my laptop in. Keep going.
First time I had to use chassis ears. So chassis ears, if you're not familiar, they are something that you have to use to diagnose suspension noises. So suspension noises are, suspension or really any noise under the car. And chassis ears give you the ability to kind of amplify the sound of that coming through what's going on. Because it's really hard to diagnose noises like that. And generally, you're going to not be able to do so. So it's like a bunch of clips that you run into a box that you clip onto different parts under the car, and it allows you to amplify the sound of that coming from there. So you can basically switch channels as you're driving to see where the noise is coming from. I think you might have lost it.
No, it's staying.
Hey!
Oh, it's good. I thought I plugged that in before we started.
Well, good news. I assume you've used chassis ears before
I
at
have
some point.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
They're up there.
So that was the first time I used chassis ears, and the first time I used them was to diagnose a Touareg drive shaft.
What, a carrier bearing?
Yes. But back then, obviously us being not in the rear-wheel drive game generally and having to deal with noises and stuff, it was very uncommon to have stuff like that. Now, obviously, it was like a squeaking noise only at certain speeds coming from below the center of the car somewhere.
Yep.
now it's probably pretty obvious, obviously, that it's...
Yeah, well, now most people wait till it's banging the underside of the car anyway.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between a repair under warranty and a
Yeah,
repair when you got to fit the bill.
It's so yeah, but obviously drive shafts are kind of a well-known problem that people avoid, and there's even a repair kit. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I have. I've heard good things, but man, I'm not sold on that. It looks pretty damn janky.
Honestly, it's I think so. Jack from our shop actually bought a Touareg, and I think he installed one of those on his car because they gave it to him with the car because he got a good deal on it, and they said, hey, it's got a blah 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 whatever. Seems like it's pretty good based on what I've seen about it, but I'm also pretty skeptical, especially because for I think about twice as much as that repair, you can buy an aftermarket drive shaft, and for probably about 4 times the amount, you can buy an OEM one. So it's like, okay, what's the point? And back then, this is another Touareg story back then.
So we've determined that
this episode is about Touaregs. I don't know if you know if this is about best and worst Volkswagens. Yeah. The Touareg is both of those things. Yeah. But back then, I think it paid something like 7 hours to do a drive shaft or something like that. Yeah. And I was able to
especially on the V6s, you could do without dropping the exhaust.
I think I did have to drop the exhaust.
V8s you have to drop.
I think I did have to drop the exhaust, but I was able to just use a pole jack to lift the trans and the differential, and
you only had to drop the front of the exhaust.
Oh, you snake it. Yeah, exactly. Something like that is what I recall.
The beauty of flat rate, you find a faster way to do.
I did have a transfer case video that we've done on our Touareg. I don't know if you knew that.
No.
Because our transfer case chain was slipping. Yeah.
How fun was that?
So it was like when you would accelerate. It was pretty cool.
Okay. So we've determined that the Touareg is both the best and the worst. When we move to some of the more modern stuff, I have to say, and don't take this as I'm saying Volkswagen is problem-free and they now have the reliability of Toyota and Honda, because I'm not saying that at all. But I feel like, especially if you take out water leaks, I feel like today's VWs are probably some of the best cars they've ever been.
Dude, I think yesterday, I know you obviously, people don't realize this, but even though we're friends, we don't really consume each other's content very much.
Very little.
Because we have busy lives. But we had a car at the shop that I did a quick story on, and 146,000 miles on a Mark 7.
Damn.
GTI. Only problem he had ever had was water pump. Only problem he's ever had. 146,000 miles. We did a carbon cleaning on it for him because that's what he requested, and he had a coolant leak that he was trying to get addressed. It was between the oil cooler and the bracket on the block, so that was it's a really pretty significant repair because you got to pull off that whole bracket to get to it or whatever.
Yeah, and that bracket's all the accessories.
It's fucking everything. Yeah, right. Sucks. And he was just like, okay, the leak is not that bad. I'll address it if it gets worse, whatever, which I get. But think about that on a fucking TSI engine.
Oh my God.
To make it to 146,000 miles and only have a water pump fail you would have been blessed by God. Yeah. You should have played the lottery 1,700 times, and you probably would have won it 1,600 times before you got to the 1,700th. Wow. It's fucking crazy. I was blown away. I talked to the dude. He was excited to have whatever his car related to, because we're also working on a carbon video. But I was blown away by the carbon buildup.
Yeah. How was it?
Not bad at all.
That's awesome.
I would say, and I don't know, because I know you did one on your R.
Yeah.
And you had some buildup.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it was worse than that. I didn't really look that close at it.
Yeah.
146,000 miles, never done a carbon cleaning.
And then, for contrast, the video I did was at 10,000 miles.
Right, 10,000. And there was buildup. It was not nothing.
Sure.
But it was not significant.
Wow.
So, whatever that means, I don't know. I mean, the reality is what I realized in the video, I actually fucking stuck my foot in my mouth. But
did you jinx the dude?
No, but what I did do is I actually said something about PCV or where it relocates. Here, you'll see it in a second. But I said the PCV actually dumps out in front of the intake manifold, but I realized part of the reason why these Mark 7s have so few issues is because they have the PCV that recirculates by the intake. So you're about to see it right now. There you go. Cylinder 1.
Wow.
2, 3, 4.
If I cared more about editing this video, you would see that too, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Sorry.
Yeah, if you're listening, you've missed nothing.
Yeah, you can go to, well, this is probably on our Instagram story, but it's probably gone. But if you go to TikTok and you look for me on TikTok, you'll find me there. I won't be doing any dances, although I may if you convince me to.
Yeah. If he has 2 more of these,
yeah,
I bet you
you'll get me to do some TikTok dances. I'll be like Charlie, TikTok girl. Yeah, so I was shocked. Like that amount of carbon buildup was wild. And to your point, I would almost say the best car ever would be the Mark 7 GTI.
Yeah.
Because
no sunroof.
No shit on the R. Not to shit on the R, because obviously I love the R and I think it's amazing. But it's so much more accessible.
Yep.
For people.
And you get so much car for the money.
For 23, 24 grand, you can get an S, which is plenty of options for a car. And you're getting a car that is very tunable, very good performance, and solid reliability. That's fucking crazy. Like, you and I both know, in the world of VW, the idea of a car that performs well, is exciting to drive, and also is reliable is like, it's a unicorn.
That's one of those like fast, cheap.
Right. You would like historically, good. Right? You would have the triangle, right? Is like fast, cheap, reliable, right? Yep. Like, and you'd only get to pick 2. Yep. Is the old classic saying, but I feel like the Mark 7 GTI legitimately is all 3.
Yeah, but even if you look at like the same generation, so this was what, B7 and a half or so Passat, the 1.8, that's a hell of a lot of car, packed with technology, at an insanely good price. I mean, you can get a fairly well-equipped Passat 1.8 turbo for 26 grand.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's a big car.
It's a big car, loaded up with all the goodies, so great fuel economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when we talk about this stuff, the whole idea of like best car, worst car, whatever, is a lot of it you look at and you think like, okay, let's see if we can make that noise to go away. If you use the metric of performance car, okay, we could say things like Golf R, GTI, blah, 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 whatever, right? But then you talk about regular people cars where it's like, what's the best X?
Right.
And I've been tempted to make content around this stuff in the past in terms of like the most reliable Volkswagens, and I think you and I could probably easily rapid fire like. The problem that most people have is the most reliable cars are also oftentimes the least interesting cars.
Yeah, that's why Toyotas are so amazingly reliable.
That's why Toyotas have reliability.
Honda Accords are great. Like
they make you fall asleep while you drive them. You would fall asleep at the wheel at 2 a.m. every time in those cars because they're just obnoxiously uninteresting. But
that's a pretty good descriptive word. It's obnoxiously boring.
Yes. But with that said, those two things go hand in hand, and that's why those manufacturers, it's funny. I don't know if you and I have talked about this at all, but a buddy of mine has a similar background to us, went to work for a Asian manufacturer corporate. Yep. And they have fairly recently, over the past few years, implemented direct injection. and they.
Why is this so problematic?
Right. He was on a call with with some like different higher level people about engineering stuff, about problems or whatever, and they were talking about carbon buildup. He told me he has a similar background to you and I, so he knows VW and Audi well.
Yeah. And
they were like, talking about carbon buildup like it was some kind of new fucking problem. And he's like, guys, this is like a fucking 20-year-old problem in the European space. Like, this is not fucking new.
No.
You guys are not
have you ever
finding
heard of the
some
small
new discovery.
BMW.
Right. So, it's one of those things that I think when you are on the cutting edge of technology, there's always concerns around reliability. And the more shit you try to pack into the car to make it cooler, more interesting, whatever, the more likelihood that thing's going to have problems. Not to mention, obviously, you talk about like V8 Audi chains and that type of shit. Like,
well, you try and pile all this stuff in, and then you tack on top of that all the other normal, like, German engineering bullshit that comes along with it, which, say what you want about German engineering, and there are parts of it that you're just like, this is the dumbest thing ever. However, I will promise you, there is nothing that is done that is not deliberate. It's
100% deliberate.
There is a purpose. Yeah. That purpose might not apply to U.S. market.
If you don't agree with them, you're wrong. That's what their opinion is.
I've been told that.
Yes.
I've been told that exact thing.
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, there is a certain level of respect I do have for, like, they didn't just put it there because
it's meticulous, right? It's not. It wasn't lazy. Like, the thing that as Americans, I think we think is that those things stem from laziness, creating you to do this thing that's just like, oh, this is the easiest shortcut or whatever. No. It's not that.
No,
it's actually.
It's the opposite of that.
The complete opposite of that. It's some over-engineering version of they're playing fucking 4D chess when they don't need to be playing 4D chess. Everybody else is playing checkers and they're playing 4D chess, and that's what creates some of this stuff. So, for that reason, I think that there's certainly a variation. So, if you were to rank most reliable water-cooled VW models.
Okay.
Go.
So, like, top 5, I'll give it.
Just off the top of your from the hip.
I will say the late Mark V 2.5 liter Jetta is probably, like, 2010 is probably the most reliable modern Volkswagen. I would put the T3 at probably 2, especially if you remove the diesel bullshit mandated by the EPA. I think if we didn't have to deal with that,
the VR,
we wouldn't we wouldn't be dealing with that. I would say the Mark 7 GTI minus a sunroof, if I can have it anyway, because that's the worst fucking sunroof design ever by anybody on the fucking planet.
Yeah, it's a poor choice.
How many was that? 3. I would say the latest generation Passat would probably go number 4. I would put the Rutan at number 5. I'm kidding. The Rutan. I'm kidding. That's not a Volkswagen.
That's a Christ.
But I
that
had
thing's
to bring
a pile
up
of
the
shit.
Rutan.
It's a pile of shit. Don't buy it. Don't buy it.
Yeah, please, God, please don't buy it.
Your transmission will shift like shit. I'm 100% positive.
Yeah, that comes free as a feature of the vehicle. I don't know what my 5th would be. I'm going to leave it at 4 then.
Yeah.
I'll just cheat.
Okay, for me, I'm going to go with number 1, the Mark 6 Jetta 2-liter manual.
I disagree with that.
You disagree?
I do. Finish your list and I'll tell you why.
Number 2, the Mark 5 Jetta 2.5 manual.
I'll give you that one. I like that one.
The next one would probably be a Mark III ABA manual.
Oh, I forgot about... okay, that's fair. That is probably the most bulletproof VW powertrain setup ever. I don't consider Mark IIIs because of workmanship problems at this point.
Well, that's different.
But
they're so old at this point, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, that is true.
The next one would probably be a B7 Passat.
Okay.
2.5.
Yeah.
Fuel mileage wasn't awesome, but
no, but the 2.5.
But the 2.5 is
2.5s were great.
Such a good engine. People do not they downplay that thing so bad. It's such a good engine. And if you're looking for a reliable like beater car, the 2.5 is the shit. You can buy them for
the latest version of the 2.5.
early ones had some problems with chain stuff and whatever, but
forward, I think you're solid.
Most of the early ones even had the chain stuff was resolved anyway. So
or they're crushed now. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. So they're not good, usually going to hold up. But 2.5s were very good engines. They were.
That's becoming like the engine swap.
Yes.
The tunable engine. In fact, there's a $5,000 Beetle manual on Marketplace right now that I'm dangerously close to buying.
I mean, a $5,000 Beetle.
Yeah, new body.
Why would you buy it?
I don't know.
A 2.5.
Why wouldn't I?
I mean,
I don't have a 2.5. Anyway, what's number 5 on your list?
I don't.
Five's
I'll be
hard.
honest with
I
you.
feel like 5's hard.
So 5's hard. I can't imagine putting a Touareg, although I do agree the later Touaregs don't really have a lot of problems.
I've done so few repairs on them.
But, man.
The problem is they're mostly reliable. It's when they break.
They break.
Fucking
It's very expensive. That's why I can't really put it in that category.
The cost of repair should not play into the reliability.
But it should
but
a
it
little
does,
for
but
regular
it
people. It should, right? So, God. I mean, someone's gonna be super butthurt about not mentioning a diesel engine.
How do you mention that though when all the shit the EPA has made them do has made that car wonky?
Well, yeah, I think most people are gonna say like ALH GTI, right? And I disagree because if you really own an ALH GTI, see, here's the problem that TDI owners have is TDI owners spend so much time educating themselves, and there's such like nerds in terms of information and that type of stuff, is they address a lot of the stuff before it becomes a problem. I mean, you probably never had this experience because you worked in dealers, but not on the parts end, so you didn't deal directly with customers. You dealt with someone that were fixing or whatever. Although I'm sure you've probably dealt with similar things that made you realize this. Is we had TDI customers with like Mark IV ALHs, and they had ALHs had like 2 nuts in the front of the engine cover and then one 10mm nut at the back, right?
I remember that.
Sure, you remember. And I think there were screws in the front and a nut in the back.
It was like a stud.
A stud and a nut in the back.
A stud and a nut, I thought, on all 3.
Maybe in all 3. Oh, you're right. Maybe
it was like
all
a
3.
Stud with a nut on it. You zip the nuts off. That's the cover.
Yeah, correct.
And then there was the stud.
And then there were covers on top of that to make it look
they were padded.
pretty, right? So we would have TDI customers who would come in and buy all the hardware all the time, just in case, because they had oil.
That Jiffy change dealership screwed
it
up.
In case somebody lost some of their hardware during their oil changes, because
they had covers on them, plastic covers.
Yes, they had plastic covers on them. That was completely aesthetic. It wasn't even holding the engine cover on. And frankly, the engine cover, the only thing it did, and which was legitimate, is noise dampening, of course. But like, that's fucking crazy. They'd come in and spend $50 on fucking hardware that you'd be like, are you fucking high right now?
I think so the ALH and even the pump dues, they're good engines.
Yeah, BRM's only had the camshaft problems, really.
I mean, and the fuel pumps and vacuum pump, fuel pump mixture. But anyway, like, they're good engines, but man, you nailed it with the ALH. They were so over cared for by most owners because the diesel customer back then was not the diesel customer of the late 2000s.
No. They were psychos.
The diesel customer of the early 2000s and mid and early 2000s and back was like the engineer that knew that car, honestly, better than most repair technicians, dealership or diesel specialists.
Yeah. That's why TDIDiesel.com or any of those diesel forums had such an insane following, is because it was all
hated dealer technicians.
They did all.
Which,
I mean, it was a mutual hate, to be fair.
You read that on TDI Club, huh?
But they certainly were they're always educated people, right? And so they know what they're talking about. They know what's going on. And, I mean, frankly, I had a fucking engineer one time who had a late 90s B5 Passat.
Yeah.
Back when they had cruise control modules.
Yep.
And I diagnosed his car, and he had a cruise control problem, and it ended up being like it needed a cruise module. And he wanted me to explain to him why it needed a cruise control module. And I'm like,
the module's bad.
The module, I don't fucking know what to tell you.
Yeah.
Your module's bad. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Something inside this little magic box.
There's a black box. Well, I don't have any information about what happens inside there because that's not the information they provide us.
Well, and that was one of, I actually like engineer customers because you can have a very technical, blunt conversation about a problem with the car, but I think that's one side that people don't realize is like, you feel like as the dealer, you're supposed to have this access to all this super top secret squirrel information. It's like, nah, dude. Like when you Google some shit, that's probably all we get to. So what happens inside of there exactly? We don't have the engineering
to this day.
Of that. No,
to this day.
And you're never gonna have it. You're never gonna have it.
And the reality is, and this is something I've thought about more recently, is as I do all this shit, whatever, is imagine the amount of information they would have to produce to give you the ability to tell you what every module does. It would be fucking insane.
Yeah.
Because there's so many conditions that create different scenarios. The upside to the people who are smart enough and capable enough to utilize the information. Let's be honest. You and I both know we've been exposed to enough technicians. If we're being very generous, I would say 10% of them probably can utilize the information.
I think it's about.
It's less than that.
10% of that.
Right. It's probably 1%, right?
Yeah.
Who can actually utilize the information that you get all the way at that super deep information at like, what does this thing do under certain conditions, whatever.
Right.
They can't fucking spend all that money and time and energy producing that information.
And most customers aren't going to pay for that level of diagnosis, right? Ultimately, it boils down to this. You have to do a calculation in your head of, okay, I've proven this module is bad because I've proven this is the only thing that can be bad.
Right.
Do you want to keep paying me to go further, or do you want to put this module in the car that I know for a fact is going to fix your car? I'm cool with whatever you want to do, but there's no point in paying any more money. And for some people, they want to.
Well, I think the challenge is, by the way, I didn't realize there was a dog on here. That's pretty cute.
Yeah.
Dog.
Lagunitas Brewing.
Yeah.
I didn't realize there was measurements on there.
The diagnosis problem, and that's maybe something for another video, is we have a car actually at our shop right now, S5.
Yep.
Dude just bought it, has a clutch problem. Car wouldn't go into gear when you drive it.
Oh, that could be
manual.
Cause a problem.
Manual.
Was it crank walk?
No. You got to start it in gear for it to be able to use it, to be able to go. He told us, hey, I want you to put a clutch in this. We get it. We look at it. We're like, man, we really would recommend starting with a slave on this.
Yeah. Well, is that in the
external slave.
Oh, yeah.
All the current model Audi stuff uses external slaves.
Which is 1,000 times better, by the way.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're not allowed to use that terminology anymore. I think it's canceled.
I called it on this car slave cylinder on a video that is coming out soon.
Yeah, yikes.
Yeah.
So put a slave in it. It improved tremendously. You can drive it now, whatever.
Yeah.
But when you put it in reverse and first, the car moves. Clutch in.
Okay.
The car doesn't lurch, but
just kind of
nudges forward just a little bit. Has an aftermarket clutch in it, 100%. We're positive of it. But it's a V8 S5.
4-motion or Quattro.
Yeah, Quattro. Corona.
Great.
18 hours to replace the clutch.
Yeah.
Plus, it has an aftermarket clutch, which means we need to get a flywheel too. Mm-hmm. And the total cost is going to be like $3,500 to put a clutch in it.
Damn.
Yeah, exactly. Damn. Or we can put a clutch master in it, which it could be the clutch master, which is on the clutch pedal. And it's like, I don't remember. It's not cheap, $600, something like that. What do? There's no good option because you could have fluid leaking past the clutch master, causing it to not apply enough pressure, right?
Yep.
There's no way to diagnose that.
I mean, I assume you could, if you had some kind of comparable spec for pressure, you could.
I mean, I can't imagine there's a spec they're going to show you for
there's probably not.
Applied pressure is
you would have to look out, I think, and have someone that has documented that at some point in time.
And so it's like, so you have no measurable metric that even allows you to properly diagnose it. So it's like, okay, well, Mr. Customer, here's our two options.
A lot or a lot.
Right. Exactly. And that's exactly what it is. It's like, okay, well, here's we think it's probably the aftermarket clutch, but the reality is we legitimately might spend $3,500 of your money
to be in the same boat you're in.
To be literally in the same boat you're in.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do? Because our options are, you can put a master in it and try that first, because that's a possibility. We don't know if that's going to be it or not. It's probably not it, but it could be it. Or we can spend $3,500 and...
Well, and not only that, you're looking at, was the slave cylinder actually bad initially?
It's hard to know.
And you put the part on, but the bad slave cylinder caused the shift fork to be messed
bend
up,
or whatever. Who knows?
Fingers on the
fingers on the pressure plate are a problem or whatever. And who knows? Maybe the shift fork is bent, or the clutch fork is bent off completely.
Oof.
So obviously people
that Corona fast.
Regular, yeah, man, that was a like rapid Corona. Most people don't know this, but there's certain parts of diagnosing cars that is, I don't want to call it not an exact science, but like you don't have the ability to know without significant cost to the customer, right?
Well, and if you
pull the trans out,
if you were suspect of the flywheel or clutch or pressure plate,
we do suspect that.
You'd pull the trans out. What if it looks okay?
It's 18 hours.
It's not like you can just
$2,000.
Yeah, just to look.
Just to look.
At that point, shit, you might as well put one.
Might as well put a fucking clutch in at that point.
It's tough. It's tough. That is not on topic at all.